Today, Russia's war machine is being dismantled. We're witnessing the machine fall apart. It's a chain of systemic failures, breaking piece by piece. And from the outside, Ukraine is not making it any better. The deep strikes it is carrying out now is hitting Russia's so-called safe zones. But from within Russia, this situation is actually horrific because they face not only social decay and corruption, but partisans rising up against the state. And all combined, these pressures change how this war will be fought. Ukraine right now is doing amazing things. It's carrying out attacks like never before. It has new drone innovations and new missiles that will change this war. Consider the Neptune missile. It can strike targets that are 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles from Ukraine. You know what's located within that distance? The Engels Air Base. That's where the bombers are for the Russian military that routinely attack Ukraine. Rostov, that's within reach. It's also not only a logistics hub, but the center for the Russian military that is currently waging war against Ukraine. At Novorossiysk, that is within range as well. That is not only important for the Navy, but it also is the home to a lot of oil terminals. At this point, it seems very clear that things are about to get worse for Russia. Keep in mind, in any war, fuel and rail are the lifeblood. Russia needs both of them. But in the case of Russia, both of them are failing. Just look within Russia itself. What do citizens see? Well, citizens see that the Rostov refinery, it was hit on August 21st. It's been more than 4 days, and it is still burning. If a government can't even put out the flames from an attack already more than half a week ago, do you think they realistically can prevent future attacks? Do you think they have any idea of what to do? And the answer is no, they most clearly do not. The stress that Russia is facing in the rear is translating to rationing at the front. But there's something that's even worse for Russia, something that scares them even more than that. It's that partisans are widening the gap. They're doing what they can to paralyze the entire Russian military. Just look at the example of Atesh. Atesh is we can define it as pro-Ukrainian Russian resistance network. They operate across Russia and the occupied territories. And for months now, they have been cutting off rail signals. They've been destroying rail stations. They've been destroying Russian military vehicles across the country. But it's not limited to just that, or just the sabotage. Atesh is part of something larger. It's part of a number of organizations working in Russia against the Putin regime. And right now, the Putin regime, how can it respond to this? How can it respond when partisans within their own country, their very own citizens, set fire to a tower near the Kerch Bridge that for weeks thereafter meant the links were down? They were able to also blow up within Krasnodar even more military supply vehicles. This is happening day by day, more and more. And if you're Vladimir Putin, you have to look at this and be concerned. Because at this point, what options does he have? The fact is, you're not only facing a war in Ukraine that you're losing, but now you're facing insurrection from your own citizens. My name is Jason Smart, and I live here in Kiev, Ukraine, where I write for the Kiev Post. What we see going on inside of Russia is something that Putin never would have assumed. He never would have guessed that it would reach this point, where we would see these choke points throughout Russia, like bridges, being attacked by partisans. That's pretty amazing. Now, Ukraine is also doing its part to destroy bridges in Russia. In fact, just today, Ukraine destroyed a bridge in Belgorod. That was very important because now these trucks that are trying to make deliveries to the front, they're being forced into gigantic detours. And that means that daily deliveries are failing. So the fewer deliveries means fewer shells. Fewer shells means fewer Russian attacks. But there's something else happening. There's the fact that right now, the attacks that are occurring within Russia are all preparatory. They're preparing the terrain for future attacks. We've seen the past few days how Ukraine has successfully attacked radar and other such facilities across Russia and in occupied Crimea. But why is that so important? If we look at where these attacks were, how they occurred, It's clear that this was not arbitrary. There is a plan. There's a plan to make the Russians blind, because then it'll make it harder for them to defend themselves. Ukraine is doing what is necessary to make it impossible for Russia to fight back. Ukraine just carried out attacks that struck Russian howitzers. Fewer shells means weaker assaults. Ukraine is destroying across Russia all the different facilities that it can find. And the Russian side really can't do much about it. They can't do the same thing to the Ukrainian side. They lack the intelligence necessary. Ukraine is carrying out ambushes that are completely wrecking Russian vehicles, wrecking Russia's ability to supply its own soldiers with fuel, and it's causing a retreat of the Russian troops. You've seen just in the past few days that Ukraine has successfully retaken several villages. Why is that happening? Because the attacks that Ukraine is carrying out within Russia. The attacks that Ukraine is successfully able to execute, which prevent the Russians from defending themselves. And that is repelling the Russians. Just today, we saw that Ukraine struck a base of Kadyrovtsi. Those are the guys, the Chechens, who fight for Ramzan Kadyrov. That's very important, because his troops are not just sent into battle. They typically do not confront the Ukrainians. They have a different job. Their job is to be enforcers. They're used to intimidate soldiers of the Russian military as well as civilians. In fact, Vladimir Putin for many years has had a plan that involves having large numbers of Chechens living in Moscow ready at all times. Should there ever be a coup attempt, they would come out. So why does it happen? Well, they're there, should ever become necessary, to go out and kill their own fellow citizens, but ethnic Russian ones, which apparently the Kremlin thinks is something they would do. But right now, they're having problems, because the Russian people are getting tired of this. They don't like being used as cannon fodder. In fact, just 2 Russian soldiers surrendered earlier today that they said they had no other choice. They were given 2 options by their commander. They could either die by assaulting a Ukrainian position or be executed by the commander himself. Now, if you're in a military like that, how much motivation do you have to continue fighting? Why would you wish to stick around with these people? But it's not the only time. We saw recently there is an entire criminal conspiracy organized by a colonel of the Russian military who is organizing how to shoot his own fellow soldiers so he could get money out of them. They get payments from the government, which he would then embezzle. That's what the Russian military looks like. Why would you want to continue fighting for them? Why would you not want to support something like Atesh or one of the other organizations seeking to overthrow the Putin regime? You're a Russian soldier and you look up and you see that in Kursk, Russia, which is on the border with Ukraine, an official there was just arrested for stealing about $37 million that had been meant for fortifications. Fortifications are important. If you're a soldier, it means trenches. And without those, there are going to be more casualties in the field. But obviously, no one in the Russian government cares about that. In Belgrade, the vice governor was just detained for a very similar case. That was another $6 million he'd stolen, which means that more Russian soldiers would die. So once again, you are fighting for a military that obviously not only does not care about the people of Ukraine, it doesn't even care about you. It does not care about their own soldiers. So Atesh and these other groups fighting within Russia today have been around for a while, and they've blown up a number of things. In Crimea especially is where it first started, and it got very large, and then it started spreading across Russia. In fact, they just carried out attacks in the Far East. That's 10 time zones away. So it gives you an idea how far their reach is. But there's been other groups as well. Look at the National Republican Army. They were carrying out attacks within Russia. They carried out, in fact, assassinations. And it was just last week, there was a 2-year anniversary since Alexander Dugin, the great strategist of the Kremlin, the ideologue, his daughter was assassinated. Now, it seems the goal back in that assassination was actually Dugin himself, but his daughter got in the car, and so she got blown up. Important to note that she was not an innocent. She was part of this cult of Vladimir Putin, promoting the need to invade Ukraine. She was just as genocidal as her father, so you don't have to have any sympathies for her. But these attacks going on throughout Russia are being done by Russians. So not only do we see that Ukraine is methodically dismantling the entire war machine, we see that Russia's strength is being turned into scrap because its own people from within are turning against it. So what will happen next is not clear, but we can be absolutely sure about this. The Russian government has no plan. They have no idea that not only can they not use the Chechens anymore to effectively be sure that they'll go in and suppress their own population or suppress their soldiers, but there's something else. They have within Russia more and more problems that aren't even being caused by the Ukrainian drones. The Russian economy being one of those. The Russian economy right now is at a strategically weak point. Such a weak point that many people, including economists within Russia, believe that there could be, quote, cascading failures in the banking sector. That sounds very bad, because it is. What they think the problem is the lack of liquidity. And once one bank fails, the next bank will come after it, and the one after that. And when all your banks start to fail at the same time, that's usually a sign that things have gotten very bad. So the next days and weeks, there'll be more news coming out of Russia. But there's definitely a lot going on. And absolutely none of it is ever covered in the Western press. So looking ahead, take a look at what's happening. See what is going on now. Because every day it becomes more clear that Ukraine has a path to victory. Ukraine can absolutely win this war. There's not a question about that. Absolutely. But unfortunately, so often it hits roadblocks, especially from its Western partners, who worry about destabilizing Russia or about escalation. The fact is this. Russia has gotten itself into this point. The Putin regime chose to invade Ukraine, and now the Putin regime has to face those consequences. Every day, the Putin regime gets a little bit more weak, a little bit closer to the precipice. And if we allow Ukraine to strike back, we will see the end of the Putin regime. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel and share this video on social media and with your friends, and leave your comment below. I look forward to your thoughts and hearing what you think. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.
Ми українці. У нас є унікальна країна. Стародавня історія, багата культура та автентичні традиції, які ми передаємо від покоління до покоління. У нас є сила та воля. У нас є хоробрість та гідність. І у нас є зброя. Ми українці. У нас є незалежність і у нас є зброя.